Hello, Rebels. Welcome to the Daily California. It's Thursday, June the 9th, and here we are still savoring the defeat of Chesa Boudin in the recall in San Francisco. But guess who isn't? And guess who suggested yesterday that she's planning to appoint someone in his place who basically has the same agenda, the same absolutely offensive pro-crime agenda that 60% of people in San Francisco rejected. Mayor London Breed. That's right. She was out yesterday saying, well, this isn't the end of all the stuff that he's been promoting, and I'll have to think about that, and no, this is on and on, as if the vote hadn't even happened. And these are the Democrats who go on about overturning election results and undermining our democracy. What is that from London Breed, if not undermining our democracy and overturning an election result? She must not be allowed to get away with this. The whole point of the recall was that people want change from the Chesa Boudin, Soros-backed pro-crime agenda. They want something different. That's why they voted to kick him out. So the idea that she's now going to turn around and put someone in his place who's just the same but with a different name is so offensive. We've got to get organized about this and put the pressure on and call attention to what's happening, because a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Chesa Boudin's gone, that's the end of it, it's all fine. No, especially if the Democratic Party machine tries to ignore the will of the people. So let's stay on it. All right. Joining us today, our friend Kira Davis. She is the host of the Just Listen to Yourself podcast, managing editor at Red State, and most importantly right now, running for school board, which we absolutely love and are so behind her. How are you doing, Kira?
Hi, Steve. I'm good. How are you? Glad that these primaries are out of the way. We can start moving on to all the craziness of November now.
Well, hang on a second. Are they out of the way? Because as you quite correctly pointed out, what is it, like a month from now, they're still going to be counting the votes? I mean, what is this?
Well, in California, we have 36 days to certify the results in California. A lot of people don't know this. And the Secretary of State will take all 36 days to tally the votes. So while some races are pretty decisive, they're already decided. We know who's going to move on. We have a top two runoff here. We know who's going to move on to the runoff. There are some races, including the race for superintendent of public instruction, that are we won't know for a month. If they will, this is the presidential race of 2020 is California elections, every single election cycle.
It is just unbelievable. I mean, first of all, actually, I'm really interested in the public instruction one. Let's just talk about that, because we did some reviewing of all the election results here yesterday with Kristen. We didn't talk about that one. It's so important. It's Lance Christensen, isn't it?
Yes.
We had him on the show. He's great.
Yeah.
So and Tony Thurmond is the incumbent, who's totally the creature of the teacher unions.
Yes.
What's happening in that? What's the latest with that race?
Well, so Tony Thurmond is obviously, he's the incumbent, so he's moving on to November. He got an overwhelming amount of the vote. Now, it's important for people to remember that an overwhelming amount of 18% voter turnout is not that much. I mean, voter turnout was so low in California, 18%. So Tony Thurmond is moving on. You're right. He's just a creature of the unions. But Lance Christensen, who has been out campaigning hard, he's the parent candidate, right? He's part of this parent-led movement. He is trailing two other candidates, Lang and Yang, that's right. They're I don't think they rhyme on purpose, but there are two other candidates who are tied at 12% of the vote each, and then Lance is at 11%. So we basically have a three-way tie for second place. Lance says that, I talked to Lance yesterday. He says there are still thousands, perhaps millions of votes out there, ballots out there that have not been counted. In California, Steve, you can drop your mail-in ballot in the box on election day, and the state has to count that. So, it has to get, it's so ridiculous. So Lance is now basically just consigned to wait for the next 30 days while they count, because his race could change with just a matter of a few hundred ballots at any point over the next 30 days.
Wow. That's
so for him, it's just sitting on pins and needles.
And what can you tell us about the other two there? Because Yang I can't remember his first name, but I spoke to him.
Hmm.
We taped an interview. George
George, yeah.
Yang, that's right. When I was down taping some interviews for the show at the California State GOP convention. I liked him. He had he had a sort of interesting idea about how to kind of gently move into, popularizing school choice by doing it through a voucher for after school clubs, which I thought was interesting. So he definitely had all the right intentions. I don't know about Lang. Who's Lang?
I don't know anything about Lang either. I did not hear about this person until they
Right.
showed up on, and I was like, who is this person and why are they beating Lance? So I have no idea about that person, but Lance is the official GOP endorsed candidate.
Right.
So he is the one that not only the party has chosen, but the parents have chosen. So as far as I'm concerned, Lang and Yang are spoilers. I mean,
Right.
I definitely think that Lance has a good chance. There's a lot of votes out there still, and it's interesting to know what the amount of votes that those two candidates are pulling.
Yeah, I mean, I just say we don't endorse people. We didn't
Mhm.
before the election, but I will say I did vote for Lance. I thought he was very impressive, and had all the right sort of qualifications and ideas and energy that we need. And what I would be really upset about is if we end up with the top two with basically two kind of union candidates in the last two. I mean, that would be just absolutely a travesty.
And it happens a lot here in California. And that's one thing that people don't understand about our elections. There are a lot of people who criticize us. Oh, you keep voting for the same things. You guys deserve what you get. In a certain respect, that's true. But in another respect, what people don't understand is a lot of times we don't even get a Republican to vote for.
Don't get a choice.
It's two Democrats that push through to November.
Yeah, and they say, and I know that the language in the insiders in Sacramento especially, and the kind of people who get involved in the real kind of who manage races and move money around or whatever, the code that they use to describing that when you have two Democrats is typically you get I mean, one way of thinking about it might be progressive or moderate, but they don't use that language. What they use is labor and business. They use it's a labor Democrat or a business Democrat, and the business Democrat is supposed to be, a bit less crazy. I think, that's the sort of basic idea, and to be fair, some of them, I know in the legislature, you talk to some members of the state legislature, they say, yeah, some of these Democrats, we actually can work with, they do, care about not going too far off to the left, and they have helped defeat some of the more lunatic things that the progressives have been pushing, like single payer or whatever. But still, the idea that that's the choice, two versions, two flavors of two versions of the same flavor, basically, it's just so undemocratic. I mean, we were talking about this yesterday. I mean, this top two thing is just so bad. It's a complete
terrible.
travesty of democracy.
Yes.
And not just the fact that you don't get a real choice, but also the way that it's abused so cynically by the people in the lead. So you have, Rob Bonta running ads for the candidate that he wants to face, so that it's the incumbents choosing their opponents rather than the voters choosing their representatives.
Oh, it's so shady. And remember that it was a Republican governor that brought us this. This was a Schwarzenegger supported idea, the top two jungle primary, but supported by Democrats. So he really sold us out on that one. And I guess the original thinking was, well, if people don't have to look at party when they're voting, then maybe Republicans will have more of a chance, but it's actually worked out to be the opposite.
Yes.
And because we have such overwhelming numbers in our cities, we basically have Democrats in two cities picking candidates for all of us. And unless you live in a conservative stronghold like I do here in Orange County, you're never going to see a conservative or a Republican push through. Our jungle primary system should be illegal. And I mean, if it was brought to us by our legislators, it can be taken away by our legislators too. But first we have to elect legislators that would think about changing the system, and we can't get those people elected.
I know. Well, that's why we just got to keep fighting, for all these changes. And, and Kevin Kiley was on, we were talking about it the other day. He's got a bill, he's hopefully going to be in Congress now, but he had a bill in the legislature to get rid of it, because it's anti-democratic. That's what it is.
It really is.
I want to talk about your school board race in a minute. Before we get to that, a couple of other questions. This counting thing. I mean, I get that I hate all of it's terrible, right? This idea that we have election season rather than election day, and
Yes.
people are voting in totally different elections, a month before, like if there's a month gap between when people vote, issues may be changing, new information may come to light. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. So I disagree with all of it. Okay. And that includes the kind of, all mail-in thing, which, by the way, I mean, to your point about the turnout, as I mentioned yesterday, the whole point of the all mail-in thing was to increase the number of
Right.
people voting,
Right.
right? And what have we ended up with? The lowest turnout ever. I don't know if, I mean, certainly lower than the last equivalent. It's less than half what it was in the equivalent last, midterm election primary last time, 2018. We looked it up. It was 37%, and now we're on what, 18 or whatever, 16 it was yesterday. Absolutely. So it doesn't even work on its face on the argument that they made for it, which is to increase the number of people voting. But okay, fine, whatever. Let's sort of give them that, okay? Give them the kind of month-long election season. Even give them the thing about, well, you can, as long as it's postmarked by election day
Sure. Yeah.
and arrives within 7 days, right? Even give them that. Why the F does it then take, even with that, another kind of 3 weeks to count everything?
Well, Steve, don't forget that this is the state that paid out, that lost about $20 billion to fraudsters who were defrauding the COVID funding programs and the EDD. Don't forget that this is the same state that had to redo our Real ID program because they messed it up the first time. So the federal government had to extend our Real ID deadlines because the Department of Motor Vehicles couldn't get their act together. This is government at work. And there's no bigger government in the country, state government, than California state government, and there's no worse government than California state government. We don't work. We haven't. There are still people in California government offices who are using typewriters, Steve. So we have so much, like the DMV software hasn't been updated, I think, in like 30 years. It was some ridiculous thing. So it's not surprising that it takes them this long. The cynical side of me also says that they like it to take this long in case they need to find more votes.
Well, this is the point that I always make with this, which is that actually, by extending it all and by putting all this stuff in there, they are doing, again, the exact opposite of what they claim, which is that's what undermines people's faith and confidence in the elections. The longer it goes on, the more kind of weirdness they put in and the more they mess around with it, the more that there is scope for people, either with good faith or bad faith, frankly, to sort of question it all. So they're undermining I mean, it's so outrageous. And then the thing that really upsets me is this whole thing about not voting in person. Like I said yesterday, I went to the voting center.
Mm-hmm.
I was like the only person there, and it was just so sad.
Wow.
It used to, I think of it as this great civic ritual that we all go and vote. Do you agree with that?
Well, that's how I was raised. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
I show up to the polls in person. I actually engaged in a little ballot harvesting this year. I mean, it's legal. So I had neighbors on the street. I went around asking people, did you vote? And when they said, oh,
yeah,
no.
I saw you said that. That's very good.
Well,
yeah.
I harvested 5 ballots, just people who are like, oh, okay, well, I have my ballot here. Will you take it in for me? Of course, I hate that. I think that's wrong, but that's the law here. So
yeah, no, exactly. Mike Garcia made that point. Like they really, when he first flipped that district in, where he is, and sort of just outside of Los Angeles, he was saying that they really, he said, look, if you can't, like if this is the system, we might as well work with it, not just let them use it. And it really helped him.
No, I totally agree. But I think my managing editor over at Red State, Jennifer Van Laar, made a really interesting point yesterday. And she said, I think what this election is telling us is that Californians, even when things are bad, they don't like to vote against things. They need things to vote for. So it's not just enough to be angry at the incumbent. What Californians want is to see solutions. They want to know that if they spend, because these are a lot of Democrat voters, right? They're taking a huge, to them, they think they're taking a huge personal risk to vote for a Republican. So if they're going to take that personal risk, they want to see actual plans that are laid out. And they want to know that this person is going to make change, at least for a little while, until they're ready to go back to voting Democrat. And even still, even as angry as people are across the state, as bad as things are, gas, crime, education, all that stuff, I think the apathy that we saw at the ballot box, which is way above normal for midterm elections, or way below normal, I should say, for midterm elections, even in a state like California, 18%, Steve, that's just
Yeah, no, it's
incredible.
shocking.
I
It's
think
really
that's a
shocking.
sign of the apathy, that people feel like, I'm angry about things, but I don't feel like I've been given something to vote for.
Yes, I'm really interested in that. I mean, because there's a couple of points there. One, if you look at the governor's race, it was interesting that I thought Schellenberger did have interesting
I did
specific
too.
things he was talking about.
Mhm.
However, that clearly didn't, I mean, what it really showed you, we've talked about this as well yesterday, was that, without the machine to get that message out, I mean, you can't just do that you can't win an election on Twitter, basically, where he seems to be very active, in a state as big as this. So, and the other point I would make is that, as I think I said yesterday on Twitter, it's now, for people who want change, certainly at that level, it's on you now, Brian Darley. You're the one that has to kind of really kind of lay something out that people can get behind.
Yeah, and I hope he can do that. I was really interested in Schellenberger. I mean, I am a Republican and I'm a conservative, but I'm also somebody who's very keen for change. So anybody who's speaking change is speaking my language. So I loved the stuff that Schellenberger was so pointed about, the issues that he was running on. I think you're right. Not having the machine behind you is not helpful. Also, the type of Californian that's going to go out and vote in the midterm elections, they want the political binary. They don't want to have to think too hard about their candidates, right? So if you have an R behind your name or you have a D behind your name, it tells a whole story in just those letters, and it takes away all of the work. I mean, I hate to say this, California, but y'all are lazy voters. Californians are lazy voters. And I think if it is what it is, like with the ballot harvesting, you got to take advantage of how things are. And political candidates the Democrats understand their voters are lazy and they take advantage of it. And I think Republicans need to do the same thing, to be honest, not to insult their voters, but to understand that the voters of California are lazy. They need clear messaging, and they need to know that you are different from the Democrat who's running. I know a lot of people are like, you've got to move to the center and moderate. Sure, but you also need to know that you need to let your voters know you have a marked difference, and having the D and R behind your name is good for that. So Schellenberger was at a disadvantage there.
What about Orange County? Just tell us what's going on there, because I again, there's so many different results, but very interesting. You have young Kim there. People were worried about that. Michelle Steele, we've had on the show. She seems great. Todd Spitzer, the DA, seemed very strong on crime. What's been happening in sort of closer to where you are?
Well, Todd Spitzer will not have to go to the runoff. He won overwhelmingly.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, yes, it's fantastic. We love Todd Spitzer in Orange County. His motto was keep LA out of OC. And it really resonated with middle class Orange County voters we are beginning to see Los Angeles crime issues matriculate across the border to Orange County, and people pay a lot of money to live in safety and comfort here, and they take that very, very seriously. And so the voters definitely spoke clearly. They want law and order. They do not want anything to do with LA and San Francisco politics. So that was a great bright spot. Democrats are making incursions here in Orange County. However, that vote proves that Orange County voters are really keen to hang on to law and order. They do not want to risk that. The other factor with young Kim is she really underperformed in the primary. She's going to move on to a runoff, but she is maybe too liberal for Orange County voters. She's a bit squishy on some of the COVID issues. She voted for some COVID bills that we didn't like. So it's one of those things where she's the Republican, and so she'll have to get that support, but it wasn't enthusiastic support. And this kind of brand new Democrat came up and beat her, and she is the incumbent. So she's got some work to do. She's probably going to have to move harder to the right to get Orange County voters to really believe in her. candidacy. Orange County
Interesting.
conservative voters aren't just conservative voters. They're very conservative voters, and they do not like any kind of stray from the script. They don't like it. If you step off that line a little bit, Orange County voters will make you pay for that. And I think that's what they did for young Kim as well.
And Michelle Steele?
Michelle Steele looks good. She's going to be fine. She's a household name around here. Her and her husband are household names in politics, and she's a fine conservative and has been holding on the line on some important issues. So we look forward to seeing more of Michelle Steele.
And then last one from down there. What about Katie Porter? Because I saw some talk about, well, you know, her district has changed, and maybe Katie Porter on the Democrat side got such a high profile nationally. Maybe she's vulnerable. Do you think that's right?
Do I think that she's got a chance
of losing?
Oh,
yeah.
Of
Do you
losing.
think Katie Porter could be defeated? We had Scott. I can't remember his name now. Scott
Baugh.
Baugh, exactly. He was
yes.
on, sounding very confident.
She does have a chance of losing. Absolutely. I mean, I think she has I think that I would house that race under this umbrella that we're seeing now of crime, homelessness, right? People being dissatisfied with the Democrats. Scott Baugh is a very strong candidate. He's got the Republican Party behind him. He's got the machine behind him, which we just said is very important. He has some very good backers. And he's a solid, conservative candidate. I do believe now that we're through the primaries, so when Republicans have to come together and vote, I do believe that he could make up that difference in the primary voting between him and Katie Porter. It is possible, but he's going to have to run a good and careful campaign.
All right. Well, now let's get to you. So you weren't on the ballot this week. It's all about November for you. What's the latest?
Yes. So I was eager for primaries to be over, or at least mostly over. And then I can start the heat of my race. I'm facing the same thing that a lot of people face in these issues, which is opposition from the outside and opposition from the inside. And I'm not the only one. There are a few parent candidates across the county that are experiencing the same thing, right? There is a certain mentality in politics to where if you're not on the inside, if you're not an insider, if you haven't been working all of this time within that political complex, people feel suspicious of you, but B, they don't want you if you're not their choice, because there's power in picking, right? There's power in choosing people. So I am unbelievably, I've been a conservative commentator for 12 years. Many of these people have called me for coverage, right? Can you run this story at Red State, Kira? Can you have this guest on your podcast, Kira? Many of these very people have been the people who have asked me as a media person over the years to give their cause or their candidate help in the media because I'm a conservative media personality. And many of these same people are now saying, well, you're too conservative. You're too outsider. Yeah. And at first, Steve, I have to say it was discouraging. I did just to see lies being printed about you is so strange, especially when I'm such a public figure. That being said, at first I thought to myself, maybe I've done the wrong thing here. Maybe I'm not prepared for this. Maybe I am just a person who comments on politics and does not participate as a politician. And then I ran into a mom who was like basically weeping. She's like, thank you so much for running, Kira. Like, we need you so much. We're so glad to have you. And I thought, I can't abandon those people.
Great.
It's naive to believe that I would not be facing huge pushback. I'm part of this parent revolution, and we've seen how that's gone. But I think at the end of the day, I can only go with what I know is right and what my principles are. And as a parent, I am desperate to make sure that my child does not go through what she's been through in the last 2 years ever again when it comes to COVID restrictions. I feel desperate for that, and I share that desperation with the parents of my area. And so for them, I'm going to stay in, and I'm going to fight, and I'm going to win.
Fantastic. We love it. Let me ask you just about the You say the lie. I mean, just give us a flavor of it. What kinds of things are they saying?
Oh, well, there is somebody who's sending an email around to GOP insiders about me saying that I'm not really a Republican. I'm not really a conservative. I used to hold a Democrat registration. Sometimes I would vote in Democrat primaries, presidential primaries. So she's not really a Republican, even though I am.
Yeah.
She's not really a conservative. Someone is accused, you're going to laugh. Someone is accusing me of being a Soros plant. I kid you not. She wrote the words in the email, a Soros plant. 12 years as a conservative commentator. Isn't that unbelievable? You can turn on Fox News. I've been on your show, Steve, on Fox News. I mean, it's unbelievable. What
do you do? Because there's an interesting question I've got about something like that, which is you hear all the time this, like when, that actually sometimes it's almost like a version of that thing, don't feed the trolls or whatever. Like if you engage with some of this stuff to rebut it, then it actually elevates it. What's your sort of strategy around all of this?
Twofold. I'm learning as I go along. First of all, to be honest, I've already, I've made some missteps even so far, just because I'm new to this. But two things. So in the beginning, I felt it best to just run my race and not address. If people have questions for me personally, I'll answer those, but not address it. But as I have had allies who are coming alongside of me, and I do have allies inside the party, and of course I have the parent movement, I have actually been able to hand over some of this to proxies, right? To take care of behind the scenes, to work for me behind the scenes, and also to be out there speaking on my behalf. So it's really important to have a good team around you, so that they can address some of this stuff and I can just focus on the message and the campaign. To a certain extent, I'm willing to address some stuff, but you know what? I know enough about politics to know that if you're explaining, you're losing. So I'm not going to spend too much time explaining myself when my record is public. I am the only candidate in this race and most races across the state, basically, who is completely authentic, because I am such a public figure. Everything I think and believe is out there. I can't lie to you about anything. I can't pretend I don't believe something that I don't. It's so easy to debunk. So I have to be 100% Kira Davis all the time in who I am. And I think that's going to be an advantage for my voters. And the rest, I just have to trust my team to take care of. And I'm just going to go out there and do what I do, which is just be who I am.
Yes. Well, I love it. We love 100% Kira Davis.
That's
great. That's what we want. It's fantastic.
It's a bit much for some people sometimes, but
no, we love it. We love the fact you can join us every now and again. We'll keep in touch with the race, obviously, and you. But what's the I always say this because we've talked about this before. The money is so important. If anyone hasn't heard you on a previous show or doesn't know where can they go? Because you've got the teacher union war chest, trying to sort of beat you down.
And
so you need money.
I need money. And this is, Steve, the second largest school district in the state. And it has the most money running through it, believe it or not. A lot of people say, oh, it's bigger than San Francisco. Yes. San Francisco is so expensive, families can't live there anymore. So they actually have a small school district, believe it or not. But this seat is coveted, Steve. This is another thing I discovered only after I threw my hat in the ring, that there are people across the state in both parties who have had their eye on this seat for a decade or more. So I'm not just fighting just the regular battle. I'm also fighting all of these people who have had plans for our seat. And, that's what I'm up against. So the unions have money in there and their cronies have money in there to fight for this seat because so much is at stake. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. So you can go to kiraforschoolboard.org to donate to my campaign. I would really appreciate every little help. Every little amount you give helps. And I am going to go out there and fight hard for you and for this state. This is not just the school board seat, Steve. This is about a whole revolution that's changing the way we look at politics and striking fear in the heart of the establishment. And that's what we need to keep doing.
Exactly. Fantastic. Thank you, Kira. Great to see you.
Always.
We'll see you very soon. Good luck with everything. All right. All right. That was great, as you'd expect from Kira. Lovely to see her. Thank you for being with us today. Make sure you follow us at Spotify, Apple, YouTube, iHeartRadio, everywhere you get your podcast. Tell all your friends. tell them to give money to Kira. She needs the money. Send the money. That's very important. And also come back tomorrow. We're going to start a new thing tomorrow that I'd love to know your feedback on once you hear it. We're going to have we're going to put together a few interviews. So it's going to be a slightly different kind of show tomorrow. Not so much focused on the news. There's a bit of news because it's the elections and everything. But come back tomorrow for the Daily California and let us know what you think.